Hello everyone and welcome to the very last video of 2024. I'm so excited. I love New Year's and I get so excited to start a new year and reset and start fresh. But before we do that, we have one final video for 2024 and that's gonna be my full year reading wrap up. I did a mid-year book tag in June and that's what I did last year for my very first video. So I thought for this year we could do one at the end of the year. So we have a little biannual book video. I have pulled questions from other people's book tags, specifically Sarah Caroli. I used a lot of her questions from her tag last year, and then I'm gonna pull up my Goodreads so we can go through those stats as well. And then I have some books that I wanna talk to you about that I wanna read for next year. I have my laptop here with all the questions, so I think let's just get right on into it. The first question is the best book you read this year. By far, that was Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing is a very popular fantasy series about dragons and a boarding school, and it was by far the best book I read this year. I had not felt that way about a fantasy book since I read ACOTAR, which was the first fantasy series I ever read, way back, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and I have felt that feeling in certain series, but I was sucked into Fourth Wing. That book is huge and I read it in like a day and a half. It was so good and I just felt so connected to the characters. The storyline was amazing, and I'm also really excited because the third book in the series, Onyx Storm, comes out at the end of January. So we'll get another book in that series, which I'm so excited about. Next question is the most disappointing book of the year. And I put The Next Mrs. Parrish. So this is a mystery book that is the sequel to The Last Mrs. Parrish, which is a mystery book. I want to say I read it the summer after I graduated high school and I ate it up. I thought the suspensefulness was so good. The storyline was great and I was so shocked at the end, but The Next Mrs. Parrish fell so flat for me and I don't know why. The author took a lot of time in between the two books. I think there was like 5 years between the publication of the first book and the sequel, and I don't know if that was the reason why I didn't like it. I just felt so disconnected to the story. I thought that all the twists were so dumb. I don't know. I just really did not like it and it put me in the worst slump over the summer. So that was definitely the most disappointing book. Your underdog book of the year. And I'm gonna say Just for the Summer, because Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, that book was probably the second best book that I read this year. I loved that romance so much, and I think it was an underdog because I was expecting nothing from that book because I didn't like the first 2 books in that series, Part of Your World and Yours Truly. I thought they were fine, but I didn't love the spicy scenes. I didn't really love the plot, but I'm glad I read them before I read Just for the Summer, because if you've read that book, you know what happens and how it kind of all ties in with each other. But when I tell you, that book was so good. I think Justin, who's the guy in that book, just is he understands my love language, acts of service, so perfectly, and I think that's why I love this book so much, and I was expecting nothing from it, and I just loved it. It made me so happy to read, and now I recommend it to all my friends to read. I'm also gonna say this summer will be different for an underdog book because this was the very first Carly Fortune book that I had ever read, and I had just not seen very good things about Carly Fortune's books online. I just had seen a lot of people saying that they didn't really like her books or her writing style, and so I again kind of went into this book with no expectations, and it was for a book club and I loved it. And I think it was because I read it at the right time when I needed a romance like that to really pull me out of the slump from The Next Mrs. Parrish. Yeah, I was expecting nothing out of the book and I loved it. An overhyped book that you read. I'm gonna say Magnolia Parks for this one, with the caveat that I've only read the first one. So I have a couple people in my life that are obsessed with the Magnolia Parks series. They just rant and rave about how good Magnolia Parks is and how strong the love connections are and all of that, but I could not get into the first one, and I'm intrigued enough because of so many people love it so much that I'm gonna try to finish the series, or at least get through however many are published right now, but I just could not get into that book. I just thought it was so sad. I felt like the relationship was so toxic and they just kept going back and forth, and I couldn't understand where like the love for these characters came from, because I didn't feel like the author wrote very lovable characters. I'm intrigued to read the rest of the series because I want to understand why people love the series so much, but I just don't get it yet. A book that surprised you. I'm gonna say Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I read that in February of this year, and it surprised me because I didn't like it. That is a book that I have seen so many people talk about how they love it and how it's their comfort book and they reread it every year, and I did not get it. I don't know why. Maybe that should have been my overhyped book, but I was just really expecting to love this, and I had been kind of putting off reading Love in Other Words because I just thought I was gonna love it so much. Like I was almost saving it for when I needed a book that I thought I was really gonna like to read, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I thought that what is revealed at the end was almost unforgivable. Like I could never have gotten back with that person because of what happened. It almost canceled out all the relationship that they built up in the rest of the book, if that makes sense. Like I just couldn't get past the big twist at the end. So yeah, I didn't love that one, and I'm really sad that I didn't because so many people love it, but it was not for me. Your favorite book couples of the year, I'm gonna say Violet and Xaden from Fourth Wing. Love them. I just think that it would be so fun to play Violet in a movie adaptation of Fourth Wing, which is so funny because I am quite literally the opposite of Violet's stature. She's supposed to be like this tiny little fragile girl, and I'm a very tall woman, but I just think they're so cute. I loved the couple in The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I can't remember their names, but I just thought that was such a fun, like chaotic book that was a really fun summer read. It's not a very emotional romance. It's not gonna like tug at your heartstrings, but it was such a fun book to read at the beach, and I thought the couple in that book, they were just so fun together. Your favorite main characters of the year, I'm gonna say Alice in Park Avenue Summer. Park Avenue Summer is a historical fiction about a girl who starts working for Cosmopolitan magazine when Cosmopolitan gets its kind of like sexy rebrand, I think in the 60s. I really enjoyed reading that book from Alice's point of view. She kind of comes in to help the editor. She becomes the editor's assistant of Cosmo magazine, and I just felt like she was a very rational main character, and I could really relate to the things that she was saying about love and not wanting to like give her heart out again. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed reading the story through her perspective. New favorite author you discovered this year, Lauren Roberts. Lauren Roberts is the author who wrote The Powerless. I don't know if it's gonna be a trilogy, if the third one is gonna be the last one, but I really loved that book. I read Powerless and Reckless. I have not read the novella yet, but it was another fantasy series. It wasn't a 5-star fantasy series for me, but it was definitely a high 4-star, and again, it really captured me, and I really got enthralled in the world and the like games that they were going through, and I really loved Kai and Peyton as a couple too. I really did not love the second book. I think the second book was lacking something that I couldn't really put my finger on. I think I talked about that in a video, but I felt like there needed to be more than what we got in the second book. So I'm excited to see how she wraps it up in the third book. Yeah, I really enjoyed her writing style, and I'm excited to read more by her, even if I didn't love the second book of the Powerless series. Your favorite covers of the year, I have 3: Divine Rivals, Magic Steeped in Poison, and Meant to Be. So I loved Divine Rivals because I did not realize that the little letters on Divine Rivals was typewriter keys. That was another book club book that one of the girls pointed out that they were little typewriter keys on the cover, and I loved that. I loved how it all kind of tied in to the story. Magic Steeped in Poison was just a really beautiful cover. I loved that cover because I felt like the magic system was displayed in the colors and the artwork on the cover. And then Meant to Be is just so cute. I love the yacht. I love the multicolored water. And that was just a really fun romance that I enjoyed. And I read it in the summer, and I would highly recommend that you read it next summer because it was a great summer read, and I felt like the cover really went with the summer read vibes as well. The most frustrating book you read this year, that is gonna be What You Wish For by Catherine Center. I don't know what was going on in that book, but I barely finished it, which makes me sad to say because I love Catherine Center, and if you would have asked me last year who my favorite romance author was, I would have said Catherine Center because I loved The Bodyguard so much. I recommend it to everyone, and I really loved Things You Save in a Fire. Those were both romances that I have reread multiple times. And then I read Hello Stranger by her, and I didn't really love it. I was very confused the entire book. And then I read What You Wished For, and I don't want to say I hated a book, but I pretty much hated that book. I don't know what was going on with that main character. She was so wild. I just remember this one scene where she's having an emotional talk. Like, she's a full-grown adult, and I felt like she acted like a child a lot. She was having this, like, deep talk with this man that she thought she loved, and she takes off running in the middle of the conversation down the beach because she like can't handle what's going on. Can you imagine having a serious conversation with someone and the other person just takes off running down the beach away from you? What? I was like, what is going on in this book? I don't like any of this. So that was very frustrating to read because that main character was very annoying. The longest book I read this year was Iron Flame at 640 pages. The shortest book I read this year was The Art of Southern Charm at 240 pages. A book you haven't stopped thinking about, Fourth Wing, which is self-explanatory. The cringiest read of the year was By a Thread by Lucy Score. The review that I wrote on Goodreads was, and I quote, "What the actual hell did I just read?" Because that's what I felt when I finished that book. I could not understand where that book was going. The plot started out okay, and then once we got into the spicy scenes, the plot just went by the wayside, and my earring just fell out. The plot just went to the wayside, and I don't know what the hell happened in that book, but it was so cringy. An unpopular book that you loved. I'm gonna say Iron Flame, which is the second book in the Fourth Wing series. I did not hear a lot of people say that they loved that book, and I think it's because the ending was so terrible, like terrible for the story, and I definitely understand that. But I still give it 5 stars because I loved Rebecca Yarros's writing so much, and I loved the story so much that I hated the ending too, but that didn't cancel out all the other things that I loved about the book, which is totally opposite of what I said about Reckless in the Powerless series. But I think because I had such a connection to the characters and I loved the world so much that I didn't really care what was going on. I was just happy to be reading about it. So out of the books that I read on Goodreads, that I put into Goodreads this year, the highest rated books that I read were Fourth Wing and The Third Gilmore Girl, which is Kelly Bishop's memoir, and I definitely agree with both of those. I loved both of those books so much. Obviously, Fourth Wing was my favorite book. The Third Gilmore Girl was probably one of my favorite nonfiction books that I read this year. I enjoyed learning about her life so much. I think I said this in my other book video, but I enjoyed how she was really real and raw in her book, but spun it in a very positive light, which I enjoyed. And the book that I read this year that was the lowest rated on Goodreads was The Ballerinas. The overall rating is a 3.44, and I gave it a 3.5, so I agree with that. I really enjoyed that book, and I liked reading about ballerinas at the Paris Opera, but the whole like twist at the end and how it all panned out, I just didn't love so much. But if you like reading about ballet, I would recommend that book because I liked the setting and what the characters were going through in that regard, but the whole like relationship part of the book wasn't my favorite. Book with the most unique concept that you read this year. I have 2. So I have The Measure, which is, again, probably my top 5 books that I read this year. This is a fiction book about an alternate world where everyone wakes up one day and they have a box at their doorstep, and the box holds a piece of string, and the length of the string is, or the measure of the string is how long your life is going to be. It basically sets everyone into a tizzy because they're like, do you look at your box first of all? Do you try to figure out how long your string is, like what the measure of your life is? And it just really talks about what you do to make your life meaningful and how you live your life, either knowing when you're gonna die or knowing that you have however much long left to live. How do you make what's left of your life worth it, and how to have meaning in your life? And I just loved it. I have never had a fiction book that has made me think so much before about the meaning of life, but I really enjoyed it. And then Expiration Dates was honestly kind of a similar concept, but it had more to do with romance. So this girl has been receiving notes her entire life. Right before she starts a new relationship, she receives a note that has the guy's name on it and then however long they're going to be together. This book was a very short read. It was a good summer read and it definitely made me cry. I mean, The Measure made me cry a lot, but this one made me cry because of I love the ending so much. And the only problem that I had with this book was that it didn't fully get explained, like who the notes were from. Were they just supposed to be from God? Or I don't know, but I did really like the concept of her knowing like how long she was going to spend with someone. I think it's interesting how the book ends and who she ends up with. Last one is books that you read this year that you would reread, and I will definitely reread Fourth Wing probably multiple times, and I could see myself rereading Powerless too, because I feel like fantasies and romances are really the only two that I ever reread. I don't really read mysteries or historical fictions again. Actually, I guess sometimes. I've read We Were the Lucky Ones multiple times, but I could see myself rereading those because I love them so much. But I thought we could go through my Goodreads, my year in books, and just talk about the stats. So I read 55 books this year. I read 20,116 pages. My average book length in 2024 was 365 pages, which I think checks out. My average rating for 2024 was 3.7, which I think checks out. I feel like that's a little bit of a depressing rating because I didn't give a ton of books 5 stars this year, but I was trying to be more cautious about this year and really only give books 5 stars if they deserved it and they were true. Like, I cannot stop thinking about this book. It impacted me. I'm gonna think about it forever. And so I was a little more liberal with my 5-star reviews this year, so I think 3.7 makes sense. Again, my highest rated book was Fourth Wing, and it has a 4.55 average rating on Goodreads. That is amazing. My first review of the year was The Ballerinas, and I said 3.5. I loved the ballet and friendship parts of this book and enjoyed Delphine's growth as a character, but the ending kind of ruined it for me, which I think I stand by. And then it just has all the books that I read this year. And then I think I'm gonna set my Goodreads goal for 55 again for next year. That's what I set my goal for. This year was 55. I did 50 last year, but I think I'm gonna do 55 again this next year. I think that was a good average for me because that's a little more than a book a week. And I mean, maybe I'll end up surpassing it this year, who knows, but I think 55 is a good number for me. And then last but not least, I wanted to show you some books that I have on my TBR for 2025. I have a lot, so I'm probably not going to go through what every single one is about, but I'll just show you the covers and give you a little rundown on what I want to read. So I have some books specifically picked out to read in the winter in this upcoming couple of months, which are Upon a Frosted Star. This is a Swan Lake retelling. The Bear and the Nightingale, which is the first book in a new fantasy series set in Russia. The Ice Swan, which is a book set in Paris, also has to do with the Russian Revolution. I recently bought the Wicked book and I'm trying to decide when I'm gonna read this. If I'm gonna read this, I've heard this is a lot darker than the movie or the play, so I'm still deciding if I'm actually gonna read this or if it's just gonna be a book to have on my shelf. I bought the King of Scars and Rule of Wolves duology. This is the last installment in Leigh Bardugo's Shadow and Bone world, and I think it follows a character that I really like. Yeah, Nikolai. Is that how you say his name? Nikolai? I really enjoyed his character in the other books, so I'm excited to read his duology. I have 4 of Sarah Adams' romances to read. I think I'm probably going to end up reading these in the spring and summer. They seem very spring and summery to me, but I have When in Rome, Practice Makes Perfect, The Cheat Sheet, and The Rule Book. I have 2 books that I pretty much bought for the covers, but I think the concept sounds cool too. This one is The Last Dance of the Debutante. This is about one of the 3 of the last debutantes to be presented to Queen Elizabeth II. This book is called Lovely War, and it's about World War II, I believe, or 1, but it's told through the eyes of Greek gods, I think. This book sounds really cool, and I'm really excited to read this. It's just very different from any book that I've ever read before, but I think the cover is beautiful. I have 2 more historical fiction novels. This one is called Teddy. This is about a Texas girl who goes to live in Rome. This one is called Diva by Daisy Goodwin. This is about a woman who is an opera singer. I recently bought this nonfiction, which I'm excited about. This is called Empresses of 7th Avenue, World War II, New York City, and the Birth of American Fashion, which I think I'll really enjoy. I also bought the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher, The first one is the fine print, terms and conditions, and final offer. And I think there's actually a fourth one in this series coming out this year. I think I saw that on someone's like new releases video, which if I like these, I'll of course read that one. And then the last two things, I have the 2 box sets for the 2 Sarah J Maas series that I haven't read yet. I have this big boy, the Complete Throne of Glass series, which I think is what I'm going to start out with first. I'm gonna read all of my winter books, and then this is gonna be what I'm reading in between, because I want to do this one first, and then I want to read Crescent City. So I have the box set of Crescent City as well, because I have to get ready for Sarah J Maas's new book, which I think is gonna kind of combine Crescent City and ACOTAR, if what I have seen is true. But yes, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed some book content on my channel. Let me know if you'd like to see me do more of this kind of video in the coming new year. I hope you all have the best New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!